just greet everybody when it does come online now.
Live.
We're live. Well, greetings to the general public for our Waitai Coastal-Burwood-Linwood Community Board meeting, information session workshop. And the first item on our agenda is the local play-space renewals project update. Barbara.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me. I think most of you know me. I'm part of the community parks team. I'm one of the project managers mostly focusing on play spaces. So I came in today. We've got one blanket project that looks at local play spaces that are up for renewal. Should I actually turn this on? Hang on. Sorry about that. Is this working? Sorry. Oh, hang on.
It's me.
Bear with me. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. If you could just click one down. Thank you. So there is a whole program of play spaces, and every year we've got new ones in focus. So right now I'm looking at Graffiti Domain, Arden Reserve, Bolero Curzon, and Aranui Playground. And then next year I'll start go into planning for Yellowstone and St. Luke's, which should be in line with the rolling renewals program that Bridie came in to talk to you about a couple of months ago, I think, last month, not sure. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to give you an overview of the general scope for those. So they're all in there because of their age. So they're coming to the end of their useful life. So we're starting to look at safe ways to renew them. And we've got Graffiti Domain. There is one tower structure, and I've got some images. I'll just go over to that one. So this is oh, you can't see that because I'm just clicking on mine here. Sorry about that. That doesn't help. So this is a tower structure that is up for renewal. It's closely located to the Catholic school, so we're working alongside with them. And then we've got Arden Reserve. Is the pointer working as well? Yes. Arden Reserve, which has a full renewal. It's I can show you the map in a minute. Bolero and Curzon Reserve, they're both smaller local play spaces where we potentially have to look at whether we reduce the scope or just do one of those. They are very closely located, plus there is a limited budget that is actually allocated to those two. And then we've got for Aranui Playground, there's only the large modular structure that has come up for renewal. So we'll be looking at a replacement for that and then resurfacing the half basketball court. So just a quick overview where they are located. 3 of them are in Parklands. And then we've got Aranui and Graffiti pretty much on their own. So Graffiti, I already said, we're talking to the Catholic school and their, sorry, I always get it wrong, PTFA or PFTA. So they're the parents of the school. They're really keen because the kids use it during the lunch breaks to create a space that they as a school can utilize as well, but they're quite aware that it's a public reserve and whatever we do in this space will be used by the community as well. So we've been working with them to come up with a plan of us doing the renewal of the structure and replacing it with something that the kids would actually like to see as well, but also working with our landscape architects to create a design that allows for additions that the school could fundraise for and add to it. So I brought along a very early version of this concept design that we've worked up so far. So the only thing that is confirmed to be delivered by us is the structure here, which would be replacement for the tower. Everything else is up for discussion. I'm waiting to hear back from the school. They have their PTA meeting later this month, I believe, or early next month, for some feedback, and we're still working through this. So eventually when we have agreed on something, there's also still the conversation as to how this would be vested to council, who would be maintaining it. So we're still a lot to talk through before we can actually bring it back to you. with the final concept that we landed on, and then we still would do the normal consultation with the community to get feedback from the wider community on it as well. For Curzon, Bolero, and Arden, I've actually gone out during the summer holidays and put up some signs on the playground at the playgrounds to ask the general public to provide some feedback on how they use the space and what they might like to see. And we've looked at those three together because of their proximity. So we've got Curzon and Bolero, they're in really in a residential zone, where then Arden is over here at the other end. It's close to Parklands Reserve. It seems to be more utilized than the other two. Unfortunately, hang on. The Curzon Reserve one, the sign actually came down at some point. I'm not quite sure when, but given that I haven't had any responses, I assume it was pretty soon after I've put it up there. So, but we also attended the Parklands Play event last weekend and asked for more feedback. So I've got a few responses for Curzon now as well. And the early feedback that we've got is pretty much helping us to develop a first draft concept. So for Bolero, it's a corner site. It doesn't really allow much space, because now when we're renewing, we're usually looking at the boundary setback from neighbors. So it puts us in a bit of a position right at the center of the reserve. And right now there is only swing, a slide, and a seesaw. Similar with Curzon, slide, swing, and seesaw, which we have quite a bit. What one can't see on the aerial is there's actually quite a few underground services underneath that make it a little bit challenging with this side. And for both of them, because they're so close to each other, it would be beneficial to actually focus on one of them and rather spend the money on one and create a really nice play space for the neighborhood to use. But at the same time, we understand that it might not be preferred to remove one of the play spaces. So we're also in parallel working on a reduced scope version for each of them, so that it would have like a key item of play equipment with some nature play and some playful elements around it. And that's what, once we've got that drafted up, we'll share with the board before it goes out for consultation.
Yeah, sorry to
no worries.
interrupt, and I'm not practicing what I preach here. I just wonder, yeah, you could, if there's the option of creating two that are quite different, so one with quite a play and one with more nature play kind of thing.
That is exactly, yeah. So we've seen too many times the slide, the swing, and the seesaw. So that's why I also wanted the early feedback to actually see whether there was any particular item the community really liked, to make sure that we maintain that, or that we actually bring something completely new in based on feedback we might receive. And that's exactly why we did it. And then the other one is Arden, which has a modular structure and a swing at the moment. So I've started to ask around with the equipment suppliers to give us options for a new modular structure based on the early feedback that we've received. And the last one is Aranui Playground, which is the modular structure. So same thing, we've spoken to the Just Kids Play Space, Play Center, have some feedback from them, also received some other early feedback that we're using to understand how this modular structure is used, what the issues are, what the concerns are, how the place is used in general, to actually come up with a new option that works for the community. And then we can probably put 2 or 3 up for a vote for the community to decide which one they like most. And for the basketball court, it's mostly a reseal, just reinstating it. So that's in a nutshell what we're working on. And I'd appreciate if you've got some feedback on whether you like what I've been saying or whether there's something else you'd like me to focus on. I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Alex, Kim, and then Jan.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know about what the families like to kind of make too much of a decision yet, but I did want to know, and I'm mindful we had this conversation last week, but it has slipped my mind, how much is the overall budget for the two that are close to each other, and how much would it roughly cost? So we're not going to hold you to it, but for a slide, a seesaw, and a swing.
So the combined budget for Bolero and Curzon sits at 180K. A slide, a seesaw, and a swing, well, that depends on what you put in. I'd have to look it up exactly, but 30, 40K at a minimum. And usually it's at least 30 to 40% of the budget that goes towards the play equipment. But then you also have to consider the removal of the old and the installation of the new. So the playground renewal at Queen's Park, for example, is sitting around 130,000. So just to give you an idea.
I am just mindful in terms of the socioeconomic areas here as well. It's not necessarily the most wealthy area, so the play spaces are well utilised by families. So I guess I wouldn't want to see one taken away and one really focus on if that would be the difference between someone making it to a playground or not. Because I think it's really essential that all of our families have access to playgrounds. I don't know for that was good. So I'm keen to hear, see what the options are and hear what people think.
Kim?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. It's really good to see the Parklands at play. That was awesome. I'm agreeing with Alex. I think it would be really good to retain those two parks there together, because I know that Mariho Road separates the three in Parklands. So you've got the Bolero and the Curzon on one side of Mariho Road, and you've got the, so that is important for me. And I like the idea of having them distinctly different, whatever that would be. And it's really encouraging to see that with the Rafi one, you're chatting with the school, so that's really important. Thank you. And also you're chatting in Aranui with the group there to get the feedback. I'm just wondering whether perhaps, well, you may have done this already, maybe some preschools and toy library who sort of work with toys, Parklands Toy Library, or getting some mums together in a school from various ages just to have a bit of a coffee with them to see what they'd like to see, maybe.
We can do more of that once we have a concept. I find that sometimes it's easy for them. Sorry, did that again. Sometimes it's easier for them to visualize once they have an idea. So we usually try to at least get some involvement of the key stakeholders. So like for Aranui, that would be the preschool that's right there in the center. And then once we have a draft concept, then we do the wider consultation, let's talk. And that's also when we go out to other key stakeholders and just gain more feedback, so we can do that.
That's great, thanks. And did you get much of the signs of the playground? Did you get much response at all?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, not for Curzon, but for Ardern and Bolero we did.
Okay, because Curzon's quite secluded, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't really see it from the road, so you have to know it's there to go there, whereas Bolero's more open.
Which is unfortunate that the sign went down, because that was exactly the reason why I put it up. I wanted to hear from the people that actually go and use the space rather than putting the sign somewhere else in the community. And I think at the Parklands play, that was pretty obvious. There were quite a few people that didn't even know where these playgrounds are. So we got some generic feedback of what they like in play spaces, but not necessarily specific to those.
That's great. Thank you. Just one thing to note on the playgrounds, when council put the retaining walls around them, like most playgrounds have, got the little wall with the piece on the top. The piece on the top seems to twist all the time. So kids just love to walk around the whole playground. That's their balancing act sort of thing. Yeah. But quite quickly that top twists and really makes it quite tricky to manoeuvre, and they're not replaced very often. I can probably name a few parts like that. Is there someone that can go and check those to sort of say either we need some more pegs on both sides rather than just the back of it, just to keep it straight?
Our park rangers do go in and check them regularly. So if there are some that need replacing, they usually do that. We also, in some cases, we do in-ground edging now, so that you don't even have that issue with it. It's just in the ground, and then it's just like a smaller timber board running along. We also use more playful edging, is how we call it, so that we actually have timber logs instead of just the plain boards that we're using, to also make use of that. Like you say, the kids love balancing around it, just keep it a bit more interesting.
So I've seen a few, have done quite a few years snacks and so, or will I just?
You can do that, yeah.
Is it the fastest way?
Possibly, yeah. I would say send me an email because it's not really my area. I could pass it on, but it's probably just as fast if you just steps in. So yeah.
Thanks very much.
Right, Yanni and then Greg and then Celeste.
Thank you. Just looking at the pictures, like especially with the smaller ones, I was just trying to understand, are they in bad condition or do they like swings, seesaws, slide, pretty simple structures? What's the reason for replacing them?
The age of them, they're from the 70s, and they maintain them, but at a certain point you just can't maintain and repair them anymore. It's like things like rust, which are not that obvious from the images, so it might still be looking good, or we do a repaint and you can't see it straight away, but at some point it's just becoming unsafe. And when our rangers start noticing that more and more, plus the annual inspections that we get done, when they're indicating it's getting really close, that's when we usually try to renew them.
So are all the elements in each of these dangerous or unsafe?
They are not unsafe yet. If we leave them and don't do anything, they will eventually become unsafe. And there is just no guarantee whether that's another year from now or another 3 years. It's just at a point where we need some time to plan those projects and to progress them.
You're suggesting we don't take a Wellington water approach. Like,
Fair enough. Yes.
Well, that's not what I'm suggesting either, but you know, like
I wasn't implying you were.
yeah, on the surface, like if we've got some play equipment that actually is functional and working, spending money to replace it, I'm just like wondering what's the point?
You should got the answer there.
So if it's dangerous, I get it. So just in terms of the Aranui playground, so I mean, I'll just give this feedback, but this is obviously a community that hit really hard by a number of things. Do we know what the budget is for it? And is there a chance to look at putting some additional things in here to kind of recognise what's been going on? And is there a way that there can be a really good engagement process in terms of community development in this local neighbourhood to get ideas?
So for Aranui, for the modular structure and the basketball court resurfacing, we've got around 130K, which is for what we're trying to achieve a very good budget. In terms of putting additional things in, that's where we would need to find additional funding, because the funding that was allocated is renewals funding, so it's only for renewing assets that are already there. So if we would want additional, I would have to get back to our planners and see whether we could find additional funding. But so far, I think the feedback that I've received today was possibly creating a little bit more like a picnic table or something. And there is an existing seat that's not in the best location, so we can relocate that closer to the modular structure and opening up the space a bit more.
And do you have like a map like we have with the other ones around what's the proximity of this one to others nearby?
I haven't done it for the Aranui one, no. I can probably get that done if you would like.
I was just curious really, I guess, because like you've got some really small ones and then you've got, I guess, medium ones, and I guess just thinking about our play space plan, where this would kind of fit into being more than just a small local one, but getting a few other.
Greg.
Quick, just really like the idea of having very different structures at the two places that are close together. So often you see it's the same, almost complicated things everywhere. So having two different things in close proximity gives people the choice of what they prefer, whether it's an age group type thing to being a slightly older target, a younger target for the other one. So yeah, I really like that approach, looking at different things for different spaces.
Thank you.
Right.
I agree with Greg's comments around that, just getting a bit of variety, and he coming along on Sunday as well. Just it's more of a general question, but if you get feedback at some point around changing the I don't know if you call it level of service, but if you look at changing the playground completely, so I think we're talking about a slightly older demographic, say an escape park. Are we able to sort of get some advice as to down the track what that might look like? Because if we decided there was enough of a certain type of park there, but we wanted to instead put in the pump track, what would be the process to explore that?
that would be more the step before I get involved talking to our parks planners.
Yeah.
And then they can help navigate that because they're also working on the place-based network plan and also looking at skate and how we actually place across the city.
Right, so that when that comes back, we can ask those questions around if there's gaps in
Yeah.
the network.
If I find that there's really clear indication for a lot of these questions coming through, and I've done it with all the responses I've received, I'm sharing them with our parks rangers for ops stuff and also with the planners for any additional assets they've asked for. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are ahead of schedule. We'll have a 2-minute recess before we come back, and then we will move to the next item. We are live. The next item we have is the Rafiti Avenue Street Renewal Progress Discussion. We have Clary, Wendy and Kieran. Please join us at the end of the table. You don't have any information yet. All right, over to you.
Good afternoon, I'm Clary, I'm the project manager for this. On my left, I have Wendy, who's a senior traffic engineer, and Kieran, who's a engagement advisor. So they'll just cover little sections of what we're talking about. And in advance, I came out here on a scooter and I forgot to put my hearing aids back in, but I'm pretty sure that the way we're facing, I'll be okay. But if you get a stupid answer, ask again. My apologies in advance. Right, so if we could have that.
Clicker on the table just in front of Wendy.
Yeah?
No, in front of Wendy.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover. Just a quick overview. Something about some early engagement that we did. 3 scheme possibilities, and then what next. So that's the piece of street we're talking about. So just a fairly short section, but it's got quite a bit of interest. While I've got that slide up there, some of the interest is to do with cycles going from Marine Parade across the domain. Right. So for a street renewal, these are the kind of things we look to do. We want to improve the asset condition, improve safety and usability. So we normally look at the functionality of the road as we want it to be. We have to make sure we take into account things that would normally be required. So this is really just a fairly short residential street, but with quite a bit of high density housing. Obviously need to look after pedestrian access, and on one side the footpath's a bit narrow at the moment. And then something that came in after the project was initiated was this desire to create connectivity between Marine Parade and the shared path in the domain, which is part of the work that you guys initiated on the domain, and just provide something there that's safe. So we want to get rid of the deep dish. That's pretty standard wherever we go. We look at the condition of the carriageway and update that. We also look at moving poles and lighting to fit with whatever design we want to do, but it doesn't include undergrounding. And then if we're narrowing the road or changing the way the stormwater from properties interact, we sometimes have to do some work for the properties involved. And what happens quite often when you replace deep dish, you have to also look at the manhole covers. We've got a tree policy that we need to take into account, try and fit in some replacement trees or new trees. We want to make it safe, possibly make it a little less wide, but that's dependent on other design factors. And we needed to put a turning circle at the end, because at the moment there's nothing there for people to turn around, especially trucks and rubbish trucks. So I'll hand over to Kieran because he's going to talk about what we discovered during some preliminary engagement.
Yeah, kia ora. So for this process, we followed the standard 2-step engagement process that we employ now for street renewals. So this stage is the first stage, which is the early engagement before any plan has been developed. So yeah, we reached out to a number of groups who operate in Rafiti domain and reached out to residents who live in the street, and also put things like signs up so that anyone who comes and visits would have the opportunity to give feedback. Out of everyone that we contacted, as you can see on the screen, we heard from 3 organisations and got 17 responses overall. We heard from quite a high number of people who live on Rafiti Avenue, which was really good to see, as well as work out of that, most notably the Eastern Community Sport and Recreation. They have a lot of people who come and visit on weekends, especially for things like rugby. So we essentially, this is a breakdown of the feedback that we heard just for, well, excuse me, you to be able to look through on a high level. So I've broken it down by the organisations as well. One of the key points of synergy between organisations and individuals was the need for improved visibility at the Rafiti Avenue Marine Parade intersection, and also wider footpaths. But yeah, there was a very wide range of feedback that came through, and as you can see, different priorities as well, depending on whether they're an organisation or an individual, which then led to the options that are being put forward. But first, I'll hand over back to Clary, who will go over some historical reference.
So we put this in because I don't think any of you are old enough to have been here in 2009. So there's a compliment for you. But this was put to the board in 2009. It was approved to go out to consultation. There was some delay at the time around what the rugby club was going to do and what potential development they might have been going to do for some housing. And then, of course, the earthquake and the funds got taken away or reallocated. So that's what it looked like then. But of course, there wasn't much consideration for cycling at that stage, because it wasn't a focus, it wasn't in front of mind. And so that's just a historical perspective on it. If anybody ever raises it and says, oh, we talked about that, then that was kind of where it was. So Wendy's going to now take you through 3 options that we've developed in conjunction with the engagement and other people in council.
So we looked at some scheme possibilities to see what we can do. So the first option that we've looked at is to narrow the street down, but still provide 2 lanes for traffic and parallel parking on both sides of the road. And we've also included turning circle at the end. So with this option, cyclists are expected to share the road with traffic. There's no dedicated cycling facility. So this option is similar to the first option, but we've had the shared path included on the south side. So they will provide and formalize a cycle connection between the domain and Marine Parade. So the last option that we looked at is to provide anchor parking on the north side and parallel parking on the south side, and still maintain the shared path on the south side. So this option is an attempt to provide the most on-street parking on the road. So I'm going to pass it back to Clary.
So really the issue, there's no more slides. So the issue really with those 3 options is whether it's desirable to put forward an option for consultation that includes angled parking. Because if I'm driving a Mini or whatever, some smallish car, and there's a Ram 2500 or whatever, those big things, I can't see anything until I'm well out into the traffic. And that's the reason that for that option, we've taken the cycle shed lane over hard up against the property boundary. Now, that's not a desirable option in a lot of cases, because you can't see out the driveways. Now, there's only 3 driveways there, and one of them has a high fence right up. If we eventually went with this option, we'd rebuild part of that fence. When that property went through the consenting process, the drawings, the design for it, the concept had a cut down fence. But that's not obligatory, it wasn't part of the consenting, and they didn't build that, they built a high fence. There's also a bit of an issue with this one as well, in that the letter boxes from the development on the left-hand side, the letter boxes are on the road reserve, but they'll probably be getting moved anyway, just something that we highlighted. So we're really looking for your feedback on the three. Should we go out and consult on three options? Is that an appropriate thing to do? If not, is there an option that you prefer not to consult on? Do you have any strong views on any of them in particular? We're just looking for feedback, really.
Right, so I have Alex and then Greg and then Jackie and then Kim and then Celeste.
Well, I think in general, I prefer that all options go out for consultation because it does help us gain further understanding of what our residents, but also the community wants. In particular, I acknowledge that council can't legally require, and this might fall outside your remit anyway, but can't legally require developments at car parks as part of the national policy statement or whatever law that came from. But we do have quite a lot of obviously high density housing down that street, and the hub gets really busy and popular during club nights, sports days, events. So I think there is been some feedback from decent sport and recreation, which I really support around option 3. I would be keen to see more of what residents' preference are in terms of the 3 options, but I think keeping some form of parking is really important down that street. I also wanted to just ask why the shared path is on the southern side rather than the northern side. Is there any particular reason for that?
Because there's existing power poles on the northern side, and we wouldn't have enough space between the property boundary and the poles to fit in a shed along the north side.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Greg?
A couple of things. The intersection with Marine Parade, is that the build outs that's from the Marine Parade works that are happening at the moment? Yeah. Cool.
And so most of that feedback was raised around how it is now, not how it's being built very shortly.
Yeah, because I'd hate to see suddenly finish Marine Parade and then being a part of that to change the build out curve again.
We may take out 3 metres on each side to change the narrowing, but it's a relatively minor change.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that's a complete waste of money if we're building something right now to be changing it in shortest period of time. By the way, the concern only with, I like the idea of having I can understand why the pathway is on the southern side for the shared path. One of the things though is you've got a lot of cars coming in and out of where the rugby club rooms is. So whether being able to have that further away from that fence, so that there is a bit more sight line as people coming through, one thing of note.
Yeah, so there'll be a bit more spacing with the option 1 and 2. With the parallel parking option, we'll be able to provide a bit of spacing between the boundary fence and the shared path. Yeah, so so we can accommodate a strip of berm in there. Like option 2,
Yeah, but to me it makes more sense as so there's a lot of car turnover.
Yeah.
With after school programs, rugby, things like that. So to me, that would be the one that I personally go for, but like Alex said, I think it makes sense to go out for the engagement. If you're going to do 1, you might as well do 3.
Right, Jackie?
Yeah, I agree. If you're going to do 1, you're going to do 3. But I'm just looking at your early feedback and requests. I'm looking at one of the requests is we improve visibility at Rafferty Avenue Marine Parade intersection. And then we go lower down and it says narrow that intersection. I'm just concerned that that's a bit contradictory. Is narrowing going to improve the visibility or the ability to exit, or is it going to actually hinder it further in terms of visibility? And the reason I say that is because often in these build outs you've got planting. Right now, I don't know how many people here are under 5 foot. But for those of us who are under 5 foot, this is serious because there's intersections that I do not use because I go to look and the plantings actually block my visibility. So I'm just curious as to, what's going to go in those build outs. And is the visibility going to improve or is it going to be worsened with the build outs there?
Excuse me, I can't say exactly what the plant species are, but you've already approved them as part of the Marine Parade,
Right, so that's part of the marine parade. So no, I'm actually.
but that's all right,
feedback.
because
Yeah.
we can influence it,
Yeah.
still, they haven't been planted.
Yeah.
So you're giving us guidance to keep them low.
And one of the key pieces of feedback that we received, that we've definitely taken into consideration is, I don't know if there's a wee laser pointer on this.
Yep, on the front.
Oh yeah, there is. Up on that section up there,
Yes.
there's a massive, I don't know if it's a flax or if it's another type of big bush, but yeah, there was quite a few complaints about that.
I
blocking
would have
visibility.
difficulty with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
being able to
yeah.
look
Even,
left. So that's
not so
definitely-
bad now I've got a higher car, but there's still a lot of people driving around. I avoided certain intersections because I could not see. So
I'll give that feedback to them because, like I said, they haven't started building it yet. They're just about to.
Right, Kim, and then Celeste, and then Alex.
Thank you. I agree that the three options need to go out to the community. That's really important. I would like to think that we, with the Marine Parade redevelopment that's going on at the moment, I would like to think that that corner was given quite a bit of consideration with regards to safety, not just going down Marine Parade, but also coming out of Rugby. So I'd like to think that the design that we have, that we've agreed to, is the design that should remain. Also, I would have concerns, like Greg was suggesting, with the shared path, with no buffer with the on option 3, because quite a few people need to back out, and if there's like my own berm, it's nice to have that bit of berm there so that if you do come out your driveway, you're not straight onto the footpath. So that would be a bit of a concern for me. I'd like to actually know car parks per option, because it doesn't sort of say on here. That would be helpful, and how many would be removed, just for some context. That would be helpful, thank you. Just the total cost for each option would be helpful, but you probably, this is standard, so you're probably going to do this anyway. Yes. That would be helpful, thank you, especially for us as a board. I'm quite interested to know, has there been any sort of counting done on foot traffic and bikes down the street?
No, we haven't got any data for that just yet, yeah.
So we do have that out orbiter cycle lane plan coming at some point in the future. So that's really good that there could be that connection from south down Roughly Ave and then into those shared paths into the domain would be really great. That means that the children have to actually go all the way down Main Parade and to Bow Road. So if they could cut off there and go through the park, that would be very.
The reason we didn't actually count the cycles is that a lot of them are going to come from that access on the eastern side that's not built yet. So it would be a fair bit of guesswork in that.
Celeste, and then Alex, and then Kelly.
Thank you, and agree with everyone. Well, the comments are really good questions. Just with the timing of the craft project, is that corner, is that about to be constructed? Is there any opportunity we can ask them to stage that so we're not doing something and then, like you said, the plan needing to make an adjustment, or is that window of opportunity passed?
We're going to be at least another 6 months, right? So that's a fairly significant period of time. We also have the designers have worked through it, and our 3 options have different outcomes. So we can't really accommodate something at the moment when we don't know what it is. But whichever option we go with, the changes will be somewhat minimal.
Just a couple more. With the undergrounding of the yeah, can we, so that you're saying that's outside of the scope of the project, is that right?
We tend, as council, to not do them unless we really have to. I can remember when we used to do it all the time, but that took a lot of money.
Yeah, I know it's quite expensive. I just wondered in terms of space, whether if we were able to remove someone, I'm not sure if they're on both sides, but if they are on the side, we're looking at maybe having a shared path option. Because often that becomes a space issue. Is that the case in this? if we were to remove them on, say, the south side, that would let us.
So currently the power poles are only on the north side, so there's nothing on the
Okay.
south side, like, yeah.
Yeah.
So so that's why we're looking at the shape park on the south side only, like, yeah,
I see.
just try to avoid having to do any undergrounding, yeah.
And if we wanted to, because at the moment we're trying to squeeze a lot into it, but I do think it's important that we find the balance between safety and the amenity of the area. If we wanted to get rid of the power poles on the north side and put shared path there, would that be an option, or is it just too expensive?
It's difficult, not just because of the power poles.
Okay.
It's also, a lot of those properties are higher, so there's stormwater considerations as well. This option here is probably aesthetically the one that fits more with the concept of a residential street.
Cool. No, that's great. Thank you.
Well, actually, I probably would have to say that one does, because it's got more green and trees.
And just to find a bit of feedback, I think I got a bit of feedback directly to say that obviously the tree policy is great and we have to abide by that. Because we're doing a lot of planting in Whitty domain, that would allow us to meet the requirements, but also provide that space again. So it's, I don't know if that's right, but I'm just passing that through. So just something to consider, because I agree that if it's up against the boundary, there could be some risks to particularly people pulling out. It would be quite uncomfortable. So I would agree all three should go out, and I would like to see some sort of, if possible, imagery of how it connects into the park, just to see what might be in the plan. But at the moment, I can't quite tell how you would go through. Just helps create that broader picture. So I know a lot of people are looking at getting through the park to different parts, including redeveloping the beer garden, and they're quite keen in seeing more people trekking through the park. So from a safety point of view.
All right, Alex and then Kelly and then Kim.
Yeah, I am a bit concerned that we're literally working on that corner right now, and then we've got a plan that's going to come in 6 months later, and we don't really know what the impacts that will be until we make a decision here. If you look at all three options, what is the least impact on that curve, that corner with Marine Parade right now? Like, is it, I guess my question is it possible to continue with these options with less changes to the corner so that you maintain the status quo that we just spend a lot of money on and keeping that whilst doing the street improvement upgrades? And what options would be more amenable to that, and can we make it work with all of the options?
I did most of the work, if you like. But Wendy didn't do most of the work on the feedback that I had, but do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so as part of the Marine Parade project, there's no narrowing of graffiti. So the curve that's going to be built will be that existing alignment. So there's no, so it will be 14 meters wide for graffiti. And options that we're considering would include narrowing at the graffiti approach at the intersection with Marine Parade. So if Marine Parade go ahead and build that curve, we would come in a later stage and have to rebuild it to narrow it down. But we're not looking at a long stretch of curve. We're looking at a few meters down the approach. Yeah.
And I know it's quite hard to say, but roughly how much money are we talking about to redo that bit?
I wouldn't have it on top of my head, but I would probably say it wouldn't be a huge amount. Yeah.
Kelly and then Kim and then Greg.
Yeah, thanks for this. It's pretty comprehensive. I agree that I think all three options should go out to the community. My initial reaction was to quite like option 3, but then I started thinking about people backing out of those kind of car parks, and I think that's a big concern. I think options 1 and 2. Oh, I like 2 because of the shared pathway. I think options 1 and 2 are simple. Give us basically what we need, and will be easily understood by people navigating the street. Those are just my observations, but I think they should go public. I guess I'm just curious about who you'll ask. Will you ask everybody? Will we get people from here? Will it all be commenting, or will it be restricted to people on the street?
It'll be open because people like Spokes, for instance, they've got a city-wide, if they wanted to flood us with responses, they could. They tend not to do that.
Can you maybe get identifiers from where people come from, just so that we can put our own weight on that? Because that would be quite useful.
Yeah, so we always record addresses and suburb whenever we do the sort of consultation, and further to that. So the second stage of the engagement will essentially be going back to everyone who made a submission, and we'll also be redistributing updated plans to all of the residents, but it will be a lot more targeted. Like what Clary said is true, it is open, so anyone who goes to the Let's Talk website will be able to see it, but we typically don't get heaps of outside influence that way. It's from previous projects such as like Ryan Holbert, the second stage of consultation was very much, we heard from residents on the street, so but there's still that option, obviously, to.
Is it possible to add another category, do you live in the street? Because that, you know, if we get 18 people from the street, all kind of largely wanting one thing, but they're overwhelmed by outside interests, you know, with their view of it, you know, that would be useful to us, I would think.
It's hard to when they give us their street notes. When they give us their address and they pass it on to us, but it's compulsory.
Yes, is the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got time for two more questions, and then we've got our next item. So Kim and then Greg.
Thank you. Just thinking about that, the corner there that's going to be developed any day now. Just thinking, could there be a fourth option? I mean, to put out to community, to give them that opportunity to say, hey, we actually don't want to change what we've got. We really are happy with that. And so there's the opportunity of showing the visual of the existing entrance on Roughly and Rain with one of those options. And that would be great, thanks. The other thing is the developers have put in two windmill farms, as you may have seen on the south side. So there'll be a theme, some underplanting or something like that along there. It'd be a shame to have to remove those, and they're quite a statement and quite unique.
Yeah, I believe the developers are being encouraged to move them
Oh.
as part of their consent sign-off because they weren't supposed to be there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, final question goes to you, Greg.
Yeah, just sort of back to my comment before about the sort of conjunction with the Marine Parade project. If this was originally looked at in 2009, and then since we've done the whole lot of work on craft backwards and forwards many times, how have the two projects not been linked at any stage in that?
I think the main one would be that this is part of 6 street renewal projects that have only recently been funded. So there was no funding. These weren't on the to-do list. So quite a lot of the craft projects, for example, were street renewals, but these were a lower priority and didn't get on the horizon.
Yeah, so they were a priority in 2009, then the funding got removed, and they were removed from the list as well, even though they were listed as something that needed to be done at the time.
There is a long list of things that fall into this category, a long list.
I can't say for sure what the programming people did in order to establish what was next, but they definitely use a process.
Yeah, Grange Street in Opawa is one.
Right.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this one. Oh, are you sneaking in? Is it a short question?
It is a short question. Just based on the feedback you've gotten, no, I'm not sure if you can, but in terms of, because I want to see the funding spent on this street, because I know how hard it is to get funding for a street renewal. But I just want to make sure that it does future-proof the street. So are we able to get advice on removing those power poles? Because if that's an option to do it now, I prefer us to do it now than come back down the track and look to do it, especially if it provides us with more space. If it's a straight up no, that's fine, but just what I'd ask while we're here.
We can look at the costing. I can tell you categorically it won't fit in the project budget, but we can still give you a.
Be interesting to know how much these things cost. They're expensive.
Right. So I think, I mean, it's pretty clear that we'd like consultation on all three options plus status quo.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Right. The next item is Woodhouse Street Traffic Calming Information Centre. Corey, if you would like to join us at the table.
Kia ora. I'm Corey, I'm the Senior Project Coordinator in the Project Management team, and I'm here today to talk to you about Woodhouse Street and options for traffic calming. This was initiated as an outcome of a recent submission in the draft annual plan 25-26, and I've actually just met Aaron just here, seated here, so he's requested funding to make changes to prevent dangerous driving and speeding on the street. We were provided a budget of 50,000 to start some initial decisions and what we could do with that. And I'm here today to provide you some options of what we can do with that. Currently, for any of the options considered, we don't have enough budget to do anything. So that initial money has been spent just on staff time, getting together the options, and things like that. So the main thing is the street is very wide. It's 14 metres from curb to curb. The Gloucester Street entrance has a small pinch point already. And that just slows the traffic down onto that street. But at the other end of the street, at the Tanker Street side, it's quite wide. You've got a presentation. It's quite wide. Yeah, that's okay. So it's just enabling drivers to kind of circle around the street and just be rather speedy and dangerous when they're driving. So I've detailed today a couple of options. We might have too many options, but it'd be useful to see everybody's feedback. I've also put together some rough costings for each of those as well, so we can see cost comparisons. So the option one, which we back a couple of slides. Option one, we have the option there of 2 speed humps in the road and then a narrowing of the street at the Tancred Street side, which is kind of like acting like the Gloucester Street side as well. So it's just slowing the traffic as you come into the street and narrowing it and making drivers aware of what's going on in the street. And then, oh, sorry, you've just gone back one.
Can you just use the clicker, see if that makes it easier?
Oh, no, this is, sorry.
Okay, give me 1 moment,
She
sorry.
did move it just then.
No, I did.
Let's try again.
Yeah.
Okay, so this option is likely to reduce the traffic speed and creates a sense of constraint from the narrowing of the street at the Tanker Street end and forces drivers to slow down over the road humps at 2 points in the street there. It's reducing the traffic distance at the Tanker Street end, therefore decreasing pedestrian access to the exposure to the traffic as well. It's just increasing the driver alertness, I guess, as you go along the street, because people are actually having to see what they're driving to and recognising that the humps are in the middle of the road, so it's discouraging aggressive driving. Create some options for some small scale landscaping, but not too much along that street. I noticed your point before about the full trees and there's just some small scale landscaping which we might be able to do at the Tanker Street end there. Hopefully larger vehicles will be less likely to use that street, so it won't be so wide, it's not so open, and it'll just slow the traffic down. So therefore traffic volumes will be decreased as well. There could be some increased noise through people braking and accelerating between the 2 points. And then obviously there's a loss of some street parking along the road where we will put those humps and the narrowing at the corner end there. So this is staff preferred option because we feel that it reduces the speed going along the street and also the dangerous driving along that street. So that's our preferred option. Do we want to go through the costs now or afterwards?
Come back to the cost.
Come back to the cost, okay. So option 2, option B, shall I say?
Let me. Not playing very nicely today.
It really isn't.
No, I don't want to do that. Let's take my mouse out. No, that's not working. Okay, I'm just going to have to scroll, so bear with me.
Okay, thank you.
This is option 2.
I think we're back.
Oh, there.
Yeah, there, that's, thank you.
Oh, wow.
Glad it's not just me.
Did I go?
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Yeah, so option 2, this is one of the cheaper options. This is just narrowing the entrance to the Tankard Street end, reducing speeds as the drivers enter, thereby creating a sense of constraint along that street and forcing drivers to slow down. Again, it creates a small scale option for landscaping still, but you don't get those speed humps in the middle of the road to slow the drivers further along the street. Again, there'll be a traffic speed reduction, so hopefully there'll be less traffic along the street, and there will be a slight loss of on-street parking just on that corner, but probably not as much as the road humps because you're just on the corner there. I think going on to the next option. Thank you. Again, this is a slight variation. This is just the 2 speed humps without the narrowing at the Tankard Street end. You might find possibly that people will still do dangerous driving at that large intersection where it is really wide. Again, you've still got the 14 metres quite wide, and so you possibly get the reducing speed along the street, but you might still get that dangerous driving at the Tankard Street end. And then going on to the next one. Now this is for a wide berm, which is what this submission had costed up from Aaron here. This is providing grass berm along the road. We felt this option improves the visual impact of the street and provides additional option for planting trees and shrubs. If we do this, we need to just notice that we still need to look at the underground services of the carriageway and clearance for street lighting, because we haven't actually looked at any of that detail yet. We would maintain the on-street parking on the carriageway side of the berms. We do have potential drainage issues because there's no physical investigation done yet for services and the flow paths of the water along the street. So we would need to look at that. Possibly you will get over time the berms, people will park on the berms and therefore the grass won't look as nice. And we do have the older style dish curb channel there. So potentially there's just that gap and then you've got the curb. So there's a lot more to deal with. Restricts curb alignment for any future street renewal projects. Therefore, there might be additional costs later down the track. And obviously you've got the annual maintenance of mowing and tidying up that area as well, and watering. So there is probably going to be some speed reduction, but we felt it wasn't as effective because you're not actually narrowing the road much and creating any form for the traffic to slow down on those. Then there are another option. And this is for tree pits within the road. Now, there are a number of areas where we could provide tree pits. It's quite a wide street. We do have that option. There are similar tree pits along Hereford Street, which we planted, which are very successful. That's also a wide road, but it doesn't really slow the traffic within the street. It's still, you've still got that width there for traffic, but it is creating a visual area.
You do narrow it and have tree pits.
Sorry?
You could narrow it and have tree pits.
You could, yeah. The tree pits themselves are quite expensive, so then you're looking at. Yeah, that's it. So the tree pits are not the cheapest option. And then just with the berm as well, you've got the berm and then you've got the tree pit kind of out from that as well. So you're coming out in the road and possibly creating a little bit of, just with the traffic road replacement as well. If they need to replace that at any point, it might not be aligned. So although we've got a design for Hereford Street, that design might not be suitable for this street. So
Hereford Street's got
it's quite
different channel.
Yeah, it's quite flat. So we just need to look at that as well. Yes, that's another option. And then there's an option which is available on Southey Street. Southey Street? Southey Street. Southey Street. Which is kind of creating two humps in the road again, but like an island in the middle. So you've got options there for tree planting as well. And the traffic ideally would be slowed down, same as it would on the road humps. So traffic go either side of the island, creating calmer precedence. But again, you've still got that Tankard Street end open. So possibly creating dangerous driving on there. So I've put together a spreadsheet of prices. As I say, currently we have 50,000, we had 50,000 for this project. The option that was costed for the funding was about 50,000, but unfortunately the cheapest of those options is just the road narrowing with staff time added as well. So the berm strips costed about 48,000, which is where I think the 50,000 budget came from. And we've costed that about 180,000. So things to consider today would be possibly what would be your preferred option, although I appreciate it's not a decision community board today, and we would need to get some further funding.
So given it's a very small, street, and we could have a meeting with potentially all residents on the street and talk through the pros and cons of each option and the outcomes that we're seeking. Like, you know, obviously we can't do it on big long streets, but this is, you know, and I would anticipate that probably only a third to a half of residents might come to that meeting, but at least in this instance, we could give it a go and work it through, because each of these options has merit, but we don't live on the street, and there is a, you know, because given it's so short, everybody will have a line of sight on what is happening. So I think it could be a really effective thing to do. And I mean, you've given us costs, so rather than trying to work through the pros and cons, I'm just wondering if members would be happy with that approach. But I'll go to Alex and then Yanni and then Greg. Alex.
I just had a couple of questions. Thank you for that. First of all, the reason why option 5 wasn't included with the road narrowing was it put it too much outside the scope of budget. So that was with the kind of hump with the on each side. The reason why the road narrowing at the end of, I think, Tankard Street wasn't included because you know how the other options you got the road narrowing and the humps. Is it purely costs, or is there another reason why you wouldn't do the humps and the narrowing?
Let me just refer to option 5 again. So
just curious.
Muddled in my head.
On the stage. I just want to know why.
Jan,
with the bit at the end.
Uh,
No, I mean, again, we could add that, so I'm guessing because the option 2 road narrowing, we could have option 2 and option 5, and guess you could add those together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll leave it for now, so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, the other question was traffic management is quite expensive. Have we ever looked, you might be able to discover this, so please let me know, but do you know if there's ever been any conversations about bringing traffic management in-house?
Don't know, but yeah, that is always a huge cost of any project.
it's worth asking the question. It's, if we can ask it separately from this. Yeah. Is that it, Alex? Yeah. And then Greg.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I definitely support the idea of just having a residents meeting on the street and just getting the views. And I really commend you for coming up with so many different options. It's really good to have that optionality. I just have a question around the condition of the footpath and the road. Have we looked at where it sits in any of the program level budgets? And I think the reason that this came to a head was because we were resealing it and we didn't spend the time to talk to residents about what their concerns were.
Right.
So we spent all the money resealing it. And then now we're, looking at additional money to slow the traffic down.
I could certainly look into that. So when was the road resealed?
It was about 2 years ago. Last year. Yeah, start of last year.
I did check about the curb alignment with the deep dish, and there wasn't any plans in the next couple of years to replace that. So that was one of the reasons why the tree pit option was kind of like, oh, I don't know whether we do trees, because if we have to replace that deep dish at some point.
Right.
But I can certainly check in
There's a smart cities program that we were given information that there's this new technology that we're using to rank conditions of streets and footpaths, and it was quite helpful. Unfortunately, the one that was the highest priority, when I asked for more information, they said that the data was incorrect. So that was Ferry Road, so I think it fell down the list. But there is some technology now that we're using to get better understanding, and I think it would be really useful, as much data as we can get around the conditions of the services. And it's a bit to the point previously with Rafferty, like the more alignment we can do, the cheaper and more cost efficient it is for us, and we can get better outcomes for the community.
Yeah, sure.
So, but yeah, I support meeting with residents, just getting a little bit more information about the other things on the street that we're doing in the future.
Yeah.
And then maybe
it's also the advantage of a meeting with residents that we may pick up some more things that can be included for little cost in the project. Greg.
Is there any reason we haven't got speed bumps at either end? Because usually most projects have something at either end for such a short street, rather than having them spaced or seems quite close together in the centre.
No, I mean, we can do them at either end, but there's already the road narrowing at the Gloucester Street end. So we would need to change that end as well. Yeah.
And
I mean, there's so many options, right?
Why would we go for 2 rather than 1? Then they're both 3 houses, 4 houses apart. Almost like Smith Street.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but we can certainly change it to 1 or
The streets either side don't have any cutting measures on them. They're effectively the same cutting between the same roads. Is there any expected difference to happen on those roads with the middle road having?
Yeah, I mean, that's something to consider, I guess, whether the streets the other way are going to get increased traffic or something like that. So I don't have that data as to, I haven't done it. We haven't done any road counts or anything like that to see how much traffic is going down the streets currently. But.
And option 5, how many car parks were lost in option 5? It was 6. Yellow lines. Option 5.
I don't actually know about that one. I think it was Burns was 6, wasn't it? Was it 6? I'll have to check on that one.
Good. Jackie?
Okay. My understanding that they're having the speed bumps where they are, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, and the reason why they were put so close together in Smith Street was to stop the going over the speed bump, the accelerating to race away, but they were put closer together so that they wouldn't actually be a temptation in doing that.
Yeah.
I'm also all for actually asking the people in the street what it is that they want, because there's a lot of complaints about Smith Street, but the complaints about Smith Street do not come from the people who live in Smith Street. And that was the thing, you know, and it's like, yes, what happens to the roads around it? When the right turn was closed off from Tilford Street to Linwood Ave, then all of the rat race runners would go up Smith Street, right? So they couldn't get across Linwood Ave, so they all switched to Smith Street. And that was when the Smith Street people asked for it to be slowed down. And the speed bumps were brought closer together so they would not accelerate coming off them and then have to brake again. So that's why they put them closer together. But that was actually because the people in the street wanted it. And they do work, because Paul and I have been at meetings where they says, oh, what have you done to Smith Street? We can't even go down there anymore because we have to go so slow. So putting them in and putting them close together actually does stop that rat race going, the rat running down the side streets, because it slows them down, and the closer they are together, they can't accelerate again and get up to speed. So yeah, I would want the people in the street to have first say on what they want, not the people that are actually using it as a shortcut.
Yeah, like I said, we haven't done any consultation yet at all, so that's a good point about the streets either side. We might need to look into that as well. Yeah.
All right, I think that's this item over.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
Just one question. We've had in the past presentations around the Healthy Streets kind of process.
So say that again.
The Healthy Streets process, and we did have money originally for a Healthy Streets Linwood budget, but I'm just wondering, as we go through this project, because of the size and the scale, whether this would be something that we could look at that Healthy Streets lens as well.
I'd have to check on that one. I don't know that process at all.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And look forward to having a meeting with the residents.
Thank you.
Great. Right, a 2-minute break, and then we'll come back to the next item. We're ahead of time. All right, we are now on to item number 5, which is Chelsea Street Renewal of Linwood Wilson Craft Project Workshop. We have Katie.
Hello,
Katie.
and this is Tom Williams. And Matt Goldring, well, he's team leader. Tom is a designer in our TSD unit.
All right, floor is yours.
Oh, it's on, right, thank you. Well, we came to see you on the 11th of August with the proposed plan for Chelsea Street. And at that point, we'd had consultation feedback from our consultation process. And we also had a number of deputations at that meeting as well. Now, at that point, the community board decided that they would lay this report on the table so that you could take into account all the feedback that you've received, including the deputations that were at that meeting. So looking at that, all that, it's come to several areas. So I was going to, through this presentation, step through the points that I had picked up as points. And obviously, if there are other points that you wish to pick up and talk about, that's fine as well. So, so the report's on the table at the moment. Now, the issues that were raised, as I say, the public submissions, the feedback and deputations, the bus manoeuvring space through the Russell-Chelsea Street intersection, the provision of a crossing or raised platform at the intersection of Linwood Road and Chelsea Street, Linwood Avenue and Chelsea Street, the provision of traffic counts for Chelsea Street and surrounding streets, options to consider different speed hump designs, loss of on-street parking and impact upon intensification, and cycle route provisions. Those are the items that I picked up from re-looking at the meeting, and that's kind of that. So the next slide, sorry. This is the plan that we brought to you. It was originally brought to you in November 2024 before we went out for consultation. So as you can see, on the section of road between Pamela Street and Russell Street, the road is being narrowed with wider berms, landscaping. There's new curb and channel along there because that's where the old dish channel is at the moment. Then as you head from Russell Street towards Linwood Avenue, there are 3 sets of build outs of the speed hump each. There is some curb renewal as well. And then when you get to the Linwood Avenue, Chelsea Street intersection, there is a speed hump just before where people would cross the road at that point. So, as I said, we're going to be, as part of this project, replacing the curb and channel, narrowing the street. It's currently 14 metres wide. In the section between Pamela and Russell, it will be narrowed down to 9 metres. We have a larger landscaping area. It will result in the loss of approximately 20 parking spaces, but there will be improved pedestrian crossing points all along the road with tactile pavers. We're going to be upgrading the street lighting where required, and we're going to be repairing the existing flat channel where that is needed to be repaired. In that section on the top part of the plan, there's a few dips and things that need to be repaired there. The footpaths will be made 2.1 metres wide, and as I say, we've got the speed humps, etc. As part of this, we're also going, it's the joint project was to replace the wastewater pipe between Pamela Streets and Linwood Avenue. And as part of this project, we'll be replacing the section of water main just between Pamela and Russell Streets. So this project is part of CRAF, which is about improving the conditions of poor road and footpaths, improving safety, and also improving access. This is in order to achieve high quality transport network, improve connectivity, customer experience, and encourage people to walk, bike, and use public transport.
Oh, kill it.
Don't die.
You do.
Oh, right. Something's come out. There you go. We're back.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Try now, Katie.
I've just read that bit out, so you've seen that, or that's roughly what it is. So, as I say, the community feedback and deputations that you had on the 11th of August, so there was all the information was put into our Let's Talk, so that was all available. And then we had 3 deputations, 2 of which called for no speed humps or traffic calming. The other one was concerned with speed and driver behaviour. In the information that came through, some submissions called for more traffic calming and pedestrian improvements, and then others called for less. They didn't. So it was very much a mixed sort of 50-50 from the written submissions that came in. So I'll just go through the items that I picked up that were for discussion. So first of all, we had the bus manoeuvring from Russell and Chelsea at the Russell-Chelsea Street intersection. So what happens is when the bus comes around the corner, there will be a build out with a speed hump. Now that shows the swept path of how a bus, a 14-metre long bus, would come round the corner and would actually be facing head on when it goes over the bump. We've consulted ECAN throughout the design of this project, and they accept this proposal here. Generally, yes, they say they prefer not to have speed humps, but they do realise that there is a reason for having them. There's a purpose for having them, it's just to slow traffic in general. There was also discussion about having a pedestrian or raised crossing at the Linwood Avenue Chelsea Street intersection. As you can see here, traffic can come out of Chelsea Street and turn left, can't turn right, and no traffic can turn from Linwood Avenue onto Chelsea Street. So the portion that you would cross is just that southern section. And as you can see, just before where people would cross, you do have a speed hump. So people would, or vehicles would need to slow down to get to that point there. These are the most recent traffic counts that we have for this particular area. You can see that the average speed is above the 30 posted speed limit, which we have in this area now, which was introduced a couple of years ago. It also shows you what the average daily traffic counts are on that first column. So we've looked at, since that meeting, we've had a look at speed hump design options. So speed humps are included in this plan for Chelsea Street. We've looked at other options. Speed cushions are not recommended. They're not being recommended now because of maintenance and safety issues from a recent event in, I believe, Wellington. There's insufficient space to change the speed humps into raised platforms where the vehicles would go up and then go across and then down again. We don't have the space in Chelsea Street because of the frequency of the driveways. And also we've got stormwater considerations there. If we just removed all the speed humps and retained the build outs only, although it would narrow the street and would give that visual feeling of a narrower street to slow people down, it may not result in desire of reducing the traffic speeds to within the posted limit. So the proposal will result in the loss of approximately 20 parking spaces. That's to do with build outs and the road narrowing and the necessary no stopping lines to stop people parking too close to corners.
but there are at least approximately 70 parking spaces left. I think if we haven't done parking counts, but if you go to Chelsea Street, there's generally plenty of space for people to find somewhere to park.
It's very occasionally when there is a big event, and so not a normal sport event, and a big event, or say there's, you know, on possibly on like Christmas or something, it might be fully parked up, but only ever then. I go there all the time, and because it's a long way from the shops, and the fast food have their own car parks.
Yes, there's lots of car parks in that, well, lots of space.
There's lots of car parks.
The only time you might see a bit of extra parking is when people picking up children from the school may come down Chelsea Street, turn around, park their car there and walk across the crossing.
Only the closer.
It's probably sometimes quicker than trying to find somewhere nearer, or with the slip lane, trying to.
Is there a question, Leanne, or should we? Can we wait till we get to the end of the presentation? I'll put you're first on the list though.
Where do I get to? How do we? The cycle network. So this is a map of the cycle network that we have for the area. So you can see there that the major cycle route comes down and then goes down Linwood Avenue. You can cross across Linwood Avenue to Chelsea Street, and as I say, there's no left turn into Chelsea Street from Linwood Avenue. There's no right turn either. Therefore, there's very little traffic be following any cyclists going along that route. As I say, a shared path from Linwood Avenue to Cuba Street, which is the little road that goes into the car park, was requested, but as I say, there's very little traffic in that end of Chelsea Street.
Right.
So that's what I have. So what we're looking for today is obviously answer any questions, discuss those issues that we picked up from the consultation and the deputations, and what are the next steps you'd like us to take with regards to progressing this project forward.
So, yeah.
Thank you. So one of the questions from me is, do we know what the mall's doing? Because the layout of the mall's pretty abysmal at the moment. The fast food outlets, I don't know if you've seen it, the cars queue up and actually block Cranbourne Street. And we had an issue with buses, for example, that used to go through. And the kids, they no longer, the kids said it didn't matter if they couldn't go through, which is kind of unfortunate. But I just was kind of wondering, like, big picture, we know the mall's changed ownership and we know that they're going to develop at some point. Who's looking at that big picture in terms of the consent that the mall currently has, what might change, and then how that will impact on Chelsea Street? Because my sense is the changes will be fairly significant to that community based on what the mall does.
So from early on, with my involvement in this project, we have been working and talking to the owners of the mall, and the owners of the mall changed, well, probably in the last year. So we have shared with them the plans for Chelsea Street. They've said nothing in our plans impacts them. They have only shared with us some of their ideas to maybe do some small changes to the car park layout to enable better pedestrian access. They haven't shared with us at this moment any future plans for the mall. At the time, they said it's just too early because they'd only taken possession of it. But we have that connection through the engagement team, and we will continue with those discussions. The end of Chelsea Street, where the mall car park is where that we have the speed humps and the build outs, and they're fairly minor sort of changes in a way to that layout, so it shouldn't impact, you know, what happens in the mall.
But in terms of like looking at the current consent, because I know that the residents have had complaints, for example, that there's a gate that's supposed to be locked at certain times and it's not locked when it's supposed to be locked. There's been concern that, you know, if things change with the library, then how do people access? So Yeah, I mean, we just don't have any, we don't know what their plans are, basically.
No, we don't.
Have you talked to Andrew Wheely? I think he's the development person in council that's working with them.
Not recently.
Okay. I mean, I would suggest that that's a very important conversation to have, because I think the other thing from there is understanding the future of the library, because ultimately having some street facing access to the library is really important. Yeah, again, just the other question from me is really around the site plan and the additional space. I don't know if you can put the map back up. So, just the bigger kind of, have you got the contextual map? Like what you have on the
Oh,
show?
sorry.
Yeah, this one's quite cool. So, yeah, I was trying to get an understanding of like the MCR, how the MCR connect, sorry, of how the MCR could connect into Eastgate. We haven't obviously approved the route yet, but it seems to me that like Eastgate would be a destination for cyclists. It's a pretty logical place for people to go, particularly to the north. And so I was really interested in, yeah, like just looking at that northern connection and where Chelsea Street, or maybe not Chelsea Street, but it seems to me that is a bit of a gap. And then the only other thing related to that was that little alleyway that goes through. Is it possible?
Jolly Street.
Yeah, to Jolly Street, which is in a really bad way. It's just so sad, really. But it kind of raised to me the concern that there's all this infill housing being built, but there's no strategic property purchase to get either green space or, you know, widen the alleyway so that you get a safer connection through. So I know this is slightly wider than Chelsea Street. We are looking at a long with regeneration plan. To me, it would seem sensible to kind of work together. If we, you know, and again, just to sort of avoid what we've just seen with with Rafferty and Marine Parade, like if we can look at what we could do together, we'd probably get a better outcome, like with the MCR.
I mean, it would be very good to do that, but in terms of, do you have any feedback, Yanni, on the Chelsea Street stuff in particular?
Like, not so keen on the speed humps, and just again, like, I just think the bigger the more, just to me, it's like, yeah, I don't know, just see it all the time when new development goes in and then they just leave all the curb cut downs and they destroy all this sort of stuff.
So do you have any suggestions as to how to slow down traffic on Chelsea Street?
I'd rather see like more like some green trees, or, you know, like some of the other options that we got for Woodhouse Street would be my preference rather than speed humps. I think maybe just the one speed hump on that turn where people are turning into Lord Ave. So I know they go through there.
No, I have no questions.
Yeah, I mean, you've done well to address all the things that I wasn't able to be at that particular meeting, but in terms of what I'm aware of and have read, done well to address the concerns. I mean, you can't, if people just don't want speed humps, then you either have to provide something different, but I imagine that like tree pits and stuff will cost a lot more than the money that we have.
So, to address some of the, do you want me to address the points that Councillor Johansson brought up? So earlier at the 11th of August meeting, you were all provided with a plan which showed what's going on in this area. So that shows that there's quite a lot of works going on. It also, I think we also discussed at that point about the major cycle route, that, as you say, that route has not yet been decided upon. This, at the moment, the major cycle route does allow people to come across Linwood Avenue into the end of Chelsea Street. So there is that option already there available for them. So what was the other point?
Well, I mean, because we have at the moment have an item laying on the table, and so we would have to deal with that anyway.
Oh yes.
And so I'm just thinking out loud here. So I think probably it's just best to bring it back and with the changes, and for us to deal with that. So I guess we need a new updated staff resolution so that those slight changes with the turn are
So
incorporated.
which changes would you like us to make to the plan?
So forgive me if I have misinterpreted, but you've made some changes at the intersection to deal with the bus turning.
No, that was, no,
So
the,
you've just
the plan has
Yeah.
not changed
Okay.
since the 11th of August meeting.
Okay, so
As I say, this, with regards to the speed hump issue, when we went out for consultation, an equal number of people wanted the speed humps and more, an equal number of people didn't want the speed humps. But when we had the deputations, there were a couple of people who spoke against them. Another person, though, spoke in favour of reducing speed in the area. So at the moment, the plan still stands. We haven't made any changes, and this is what the workshop is about.
But we can answer the questions around the buses being able to get around the corner adequately.
Yes, we've done that. So we've made sure that they can get round the corner. Those are the sweat paths.
And so really we need to deal with the item that is lying on the table.
Do you want us to bring it back as it is, or do you want us to look at making changes to it before we bring it back to you?
So personally, I am happy for it to come back the way that it is, and for us to decide on that basis. I do wonder about the middle speed hump, if that is necessary. I don't have a particular issue with the. So one of the residents that is particularly concerned is that those two middle ones thinks that they are unnecessary. But I guess for the record, I'd like your advice on what the impact of removing those would be.
So good practice, so similar to Woodhouse, so good practice is that for traffic hump speed reduction, you want speed humps around every 70 to 80 metres. And so based on the premise that this scheme was looking at safety and speed reduction, that's why you have that concentration. So technically, if you take out the middle two, you're still going to get some speed reduction, but it's not going to go the full hog. It's not going to get the maximum amount of benefit.
And we know that there's a high number of cyclists and pedestrians and children, and so we kind of be not achieving the purpose, which is to reduce harm to vulnerable people. Kim.
Thank you. Just being at the board before I was on the committee board, so getting my head around. I'm just wondering if there was, this may not be possible, offer an option two, like we just listened to the previous presentation for the street. I just thought, given those tree pit, maybe there could be a combination of speed humps and tree pits, only because the amenity of the street I think could be improved. And if people were aware that there perhaps was a narrowing down of the road, which perhaps might not make the street look better, those that don't like speed humps and those that do might come to a compromise. I'm sure how that would sit.
So in the narrowed section, as you can see, there's wider berms and trees. Where we've got the 3 speed humps with the build outs, you can see that on 2 of them, there are trees. Now, the difficulty with putting trees on the other side, whether they're on a build out or whatever, is where the water main is. So we're renewing the water main from Russell to Pamela, where we're widening it because we have to. It's old asbestos concrete and it has to be replaced. We haven't budgeted to replace the water main all the way then from Russell through to Linwood. And the other point, I think, as brought up by Councillor Johansson, is that we don't really know what the mall does have in planned for the future. So these items are, they are sort of fairly light touch. They don't involve digging up the whole road and replacing what's underneath. We've got a lot of, assets or services.
So in terms of what could be done at this stage while we have the item on the table, there's not really a huge amount of change that can be made. It's really just removing elements of the plan.
Yes, probably that's about it. I mean, as I say, we have looked at alternatives to the speed humps, such as chicanes and raised platforms. I said, and speed cushions are not an option. We just don't have the space between the many driveways to get that sort of treatment in. Plus, they actually do cost more money.
Well, in that case, I think it's best to bring it back as proposed, and then if there isn't, if the majority of the board will to remove some elements, then that could be happen at the meeting. But I'm happy that you've answered the questions that needed answering. All right.
I just say if we do change the plan, we would need to go back out for consultation, and we would need to also relook at the safety audit as with any changes to plans.
But the board could amend the recommendation at the meeting.
That's right. Then we could go back out, and then we could come back to you with the findings.
We need to go back.
Oh, we don't.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we could do something. We could do something silly, and that would be on us. Or we could do something really amazing, and that would be on.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I've got that wrong.
No, that's all good. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and between the meeting and now and before then.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we are just waiting on our bylaw expert. So in the meantime, we will adjourn. by elections afterwards, but then it's by laws. We're live.
Cool,
Thank you. Over to you.
Do we have a presentation? Just somewhere. Cool, thank you. So I'm Tina, this is Philip. We are from the policy team, and our team has a subset which manages the review of all bylaws across council, and we lead the review of all bylaws and any amendment work and provide advice on bylaws as well. Is this going or not going? It's really, it's going.
Oh, bear with me. It's
I know,
chaotic.
it's the opposite of what you think.
Yes, I recall last time turning it off when it was supposed to be on.
Just bear with me because it's not quite displaying what I wanted. Trying.
She's amazing, isn't she? Really amazing.
Okay, let's try again.
So this is a presentation that we've given at the start of every term for quite a few terms now, and it's sort of designed as a a bylaws 101 if you're not used to bylaws, or as a refresher if you've been around bylaws before. So we're going to take you through some sort of bylaws 101 stuff. We're going to talk about the bylaws that we're reviewing this term, and then I'm going to hand over to Philip, and he's going to talk about a review that we've done some work on that's progressing well, which is the alcohol restrictions in public places.
Does the clicker work?
I'll just check.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so bylaws are local laws which are made by council and only apply in the district in which they're made. There's a tiny exception to that, which is around reserves, but otherwise the bylaws can only apply to the land within the district. They generally allow us to regulate things that impact on council land or infrastructure, so things like public places, roads, any pipes and services and things like that. We need legislation to make a bylaw. There are lots of different bits of legislation that have bylaw making powers, and they have a big impact on what we can do with a bylaw. They're not the same. Just because it's called a bylaw, it doesn't mean that we have the same opportunities. There are quite different constraints and options. We have 16 different bylaws here, and they're made under 8 different bits of legislation. So 8 different statutes. That's things like Dog Control Act, Freedom Camping Act, Prostitution Reform Act, Land Transport Act, Waste Minimisation Act, Burial and Cremation Act, Local Government Act, and a couple of other ones. So they're all a little bit different. They're ultimately a regulatory tool, and when we make a bylaw, it's a law-making process, so it has a lot of restrictions around it. Bylaws generally require things to be done or prevent things from being done, and they allow us to enforce things, and the options that we have across different bylaws vary, and the enforcement roles vary. So I'm going to give you some examples on this page. These are all of the bylaws in alphabetical order. There are a lot of them. So for example, there's a couple of bylaws that we must have, that all councils must have, and one example of that is the dog control bylaw. Every council must have a policy on dogs and a bylaw to enforce it. There are functional ones like the traffic and parking bylaw, where we, as a road controlling authority, we must have a bylaw to allow us to regulate certain things, and without that we wouldn't be able to use those regulatory powers to manage what's happening on our roads. We have several special enforcement groups in council. So we have the animal management team who enforce the dog control bylaw, and we have the parking compliance team that enforce in relation to traffic and parking. We have several bylaws that can only be enforced by the police. So the alcohol restrictions bylaw is one. The cruising and prohibited times on roads bylaw is another. That's to do with people often call it the boy racer bylaw. So anything to do with moving vehicle offences can only be enforced by the police. Good question.
Yeah, why is the alcohol bylaw enforced? Why is it staff safety, or is there a regulatory reason?
The law says that the police can enforce it, and it doesn't say that council officers can enforce it.
Because of the way we put the bylaw.
That's what the law says, that applies across the country.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we used to come up with the bylaw.
Yeah. And that's about all. Oh, and the only external contractors we use are for the Freedom Camping bylaw, and that's because that is largely an activity that happens at night, so we do evening patrols and morning patrols outside of normal staff working hours. Does anyone have any questions about any of the bylaws there? I'm happy to answer anything. Yes.
So I'm just a bit confused about that interface between sort of local bylaws and national bylaws. So say Freedom Camping, we have a Freedom Camping Act, right? And then we can set bylaws here as long as they don't contravene the national act, is that correct?
It's a little bit more complicated than that. So you're right, the Freedom Camping Act covers the whole country. Within that act, it gives councils certain powers that we can use in certain circumstances, and they are limited. So the Freedom Camping Act has tight assessment criteria and a narrow range of things that we're allowed to regulate. On that end of things, the most strict one that we have that requires evidence is the alcohol-related bylaw. So the Act says you must have a certain type of evidence, whereas with other bylaw making powers, so again, it goes back to the Act that it's made under, some of them will just say you can regulate these things and it doesn't have any other requirements around it.
And also something I didn't understand was that the chief executive of the council has an ability to put in a sort of like a temporary ban or something like that.
For the Freedom Camping Act, sorry, for the Freedom Camping bylaw, we put in, and it's quite common in Freedom Camping bylaws, to put in a power for the chief executive to temporarily respond to urgent situations that are problematic and basically to shut down Freedom Camping. And that was used, for example, in Banks Peninsula, so in French Farm and Barry's Bay, when Freedom Camping was first happening, and it was quite early days, so pre-COVID times, and there were hundreds of people camping. There were tents everywhere. There was one toilet which was overflowing, the septic tank was full. There was a lot of drug and alcohol stuff. There was rubbish everywhere. It was a disaster. And so those emergency powers were put in because they linked to the purposes of the Act, which are around protecting visitors to an area, protecting access and protecting the area. So all of those things were going wrong.
And just a final question, how long can the chief executive have something like that? It's temporary, what is the term of temporary?
And there's nothing specified, but it would be a legal interpretation around what's appropriate.
So it could be challenged?
Yes.
Legally?
Yes. Yes.
So that temporary bylaw, power, I guess, in the bylaw, that was us that put it in there rather than the Act itself, is that correct?
Yes, but because it's a power used under that bylaw, it still has to comply with the primary Act in terms of the purposes that we are allowed to regulate and create offences.
So in terms of temporary, you mentioned there are other councils that have, the power of the chief to do that. Have we actually got a test for what is temporary legally?
I'm sure that there has been some legal advice provided at some point. So, for example, here in the coastal area, we used it temporarily in the North Beach car park before COVID, and then we had the COVID full border shutdown, so it was a little bit weird. But we did that because it was becoming really problematic, and also because we were about to review the bylaw. So that sort of combination of things, and we only applied it to that very small area of land. And I think we only did it at weekends, and that was around the busyness of the Surf Life Saving Club and North Wye and other things around North Beach which happen at weekends. So we put it in place because it was justifiable in terms of the protections under the Act. So it's complex. It's not always just a quick look at it and say it has to align with that legislative stuff because it's lawmaking.
Yes, so theoretically you could expand the scope of or define what temporary is, but there's a risk that would act in contrary to the Act itself. Is that correct?
The temporary is less. Temporary wouldn't be a few years. Temporary would be short term. You'd have to have a reason why it was temporary, why you're putting it in, why it was deemed urgent, and it would have to align with the four criteria in the bylaw, which are around maintenance or events or health and safety, or a fourth one that I can't remember, and they link back to those bylaw making powers in the Freedom Camping Act.
And are we pretty conservative in terms of how we read those bylaws in terms of application? Would you say that council is, without going too far, I don't know, feel free to don't want to answer this, but in terms of council being a bit too conservative because of risk of legal action,
The risk of legal action is pretty real for freedom camping. There are a lot of freedom camping bylaws that have been challenged. So that risk is higher than for other bylaw making, so we are aware of that. But it does depend on the situation. It depends on what area you're proposing, how long it will be in place, what justification you have, whether it meets the criteria. Like, you couldn't ban it in the whole coastal area temporarily. That would not fly in terms of our legal powers. So the thing is, because it would be a temporary decision to prohibit it, someone that broke that prohibition will be committing an offence, which means they will be charged, they'll get an infringement fine with it. So there's a legal process that has to connect with it. So it is, again, lawmaking. It's not just a management tool where you can ban it to manage some things. It is a bit more than that because it links to offences and stuff.
And lastly, I'll keep it quick. I'm not saying I want to do this. I just wanted to question whether or not, when was the freedom camping highlighted at our last board meeting? There was a reference to Queenstown, and I mean, there were quite a few differences there. Would we even test the law if we thought, we wanted to get some further clarity on our interpretation, or would we just say it is too risky in terms of?
How would we challenge the law?
We'd wait for someone to do it judicially.
But we still have to comply with the law to use those powers, and that's a decision that only council can make. So the temporary powers, the chief executive power, because of the way the Freedom Camping Act works, the area has to be specified in the bylaw, which means you have to amend the bylaw to regulate an area, and you have to meet that assessment criteria, and that requires that it is reasonable and proportionate, that it only regulates those three things that the council deems it necessary to regulate those things, and it has to go through a Bill of Rights Act assessment. So and you have to have evidence, and the recent, I'll stop talking about this. The recent case law out of Queenstown is very important.
Yeah.
And what that does is really limit what councils can consider when they're looking to regulate. So what that did is the bylaw was challenged through judicial review. It was quashed by the judge, and the judge said that they had used powers that were outside of the legal powers, and they related to considering matters that were irrelevant, because the Act only lets you look at the land you're regulating and the impacts on that land. It doesn't let you look at the impacts on residents, on private property near the land. It doesn't let you look at wider things like, we often, people will say, why don't you regulate to ban it around this camping ground or around these commercial accommodation providers? Or because we can't, the Act doesn't let us. So that comes back to that slide before about the bylaw making power has a big impact on what we can regulate. And the Freedom Camping Act is a really tricky one. We put it in place in 2015, amended it in 2016, amended it in 2018, reviewed it in 2021, amended it to adjust the regulation in 2023. It's our most amended bylaw, and it's slow to catch up to what is happening sometimes.
Okay, I think it is really thorough. I really appreciate it. No, it's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim.
Thank you. As you can see, freedom camping is a big topic around here on the side of town. Just trying to understand why, you haven't got through the presentation yet, but on the list of bylaws that you're going to be reviewing at the moment, freedom camping isn't on it.
Yes.
So I'm just, so bylaws, I mean, I'm afraid of bedtime reading, okay?
I mean, they will put you to sleep sometimes, but they can be helpful.
I'm trying to get my head around it. So this is the context and overview that I believe that I've understood, but open for any reference. So just stepping back a little bit, because we're getting into the nitty gritty. So we had the freedom camping bylaw, we had it of 2015. So we had that bylaw. That bylaw was fully reviewed and replaced in 2021. So that's the new bylaw.
Yep.
So
it's a replacement bylaw, yeah.
It replaced the other one. So
yes, so it's not a new bylaw in terms of review timeframes.
My understanding is that that was reviewed and replaced. So when you replace something, that's the new bylaw.
It's not a new. So there's a slide coming up around the review obligations and legislation, and they say you need to review a new bylaw within 5 years of it first coming into force, and then at least once every 10 years after that. So that 2021 review was a replacement bylaw, not a new bylaw. That was the 5-year review of the new bylaw in 2015. That was our new bylaw.
Can you show me where that? is there someone in there that says that? Because that's,
Sure.
to the board, please, that would be good. Because that's not how I read it. So my understanding I felt was that the bylaws, because it had been replaced, that's in the bylaw, because it completely reviewed it. So that's the new one. Otherwise, if we just amend it all the time, then we'd be pushing out to there.
An amendment's slightly different to a review. So a review is a full
review
process. Yeah, an amendment just focuses on one aspect of it.
That's right. So that's what we did in 2023, which was we amended it for self-contained people.
Can we turn that microphone off?
So
Thanks.
yes, I really would like to get some clarity for the board. It's really important that I would have thought that we were to, because it was a completely new. We reviewed the entire thing, so I'd just really like to understand.
It's a standard convention. All of our bylaws are like this. The first time it's ever made is the new bylaw that has to be reviewed within 5 years. Then that review, it's not a new bylaw, it's a replacement bylaw, and then that has to be done once every 10 years, at least once within 10 years after that.
Okay, well, that would be good if you could show the board. Thank you, that would be good. Because that's quite a key thing, really. It has said that the staff, some of the emails that have gone by, is that it would be renewed or looked at in 28, 29. So where are you basing the review from the amendment from 2023?
From 2021, when it was last adopted in full, and we have a no, it's the next slide. We have a 10-year timetable to review all of our bylaws that coordinates the review across all 16 of those bylaws, and so we have to review them within 10 years, not always at exactly 10 years, and across those 16 bylaws we'll bring them forward. We can't push them back, but we will bring them forward sometimes because of workload or because of election periods or for other reasons. So we stagger and coordinate them. So that's just an indication of when we're likely to start the next review.
Yes, thank you. The other thing about the legal challenge is it changing the bylaw, when it says about the restricting, the Act says that you can, my understanding, the Act says that you can't restrict an entire district.
Can't prohibit.
Prohibit it.
And its effect.
So within that context, when we're alluding to the fact of potentially, you know, if this is what community are wanting, putting a freedom camping ban in from a certain area along the coast or right along the coast, that's not restricting or prohibiting the entire district. So that would be.
But it can only work within those bylaw making powers.
Yes.
And you have to have good evidence for those bylaw making powers.
So there is a possibility, which we have.
And it doesn't just look at freedom camping restrictions, it would look at other restrictions as well. If someone wanted to challenge it, they could look at other restrictions that we have in place that might limit or have the effect of limiting freedom camping, like overnight parking restrictions and parks and reserves bylaw, which is made under different legislation, which prohibits in a different way. So it's not easy. It's complicated, and there are legal arguments that have to be made for those.
So hypothetically, say for example, those three, the protection of the environment, protection of the health and safety, and protection of the assets or access to those assets. If they were ticked off, and there was, they could only challenge on the process. Challenge would be about the process.
A challenge can be about anything. They can look at the process, they can look at the use of powers, whether they think they are within, so the general principles of bylaws out there. So bylaws cannot be ultra vires, so that is outside of the legal powers. They cannot be repugnant to the laws of New Zealand, which is in conflict with or trying to override other laws. They cannot be uncertain, so it has to be clear what the regulated party can and can't do, and they must not be unreasonable. And so those general principles are.
It's different from a normal like resolution of council, right? So like you kind of think what Kim's getting at, like a standard judicial review of an action by a public decision maker is around process.
Yes.
Whereas with this is very much if this meets the statutory test, it would be able to be implemented.
There's two different aspects to it. One is the judicial review challenge, which is about process. The other is the Bylaws Act 1910, which, though it is a very old piece of legislation, contains those fundamental principles around bylaws, and often bylaws will be challenged on the basis of the Bylaws Act 1910 as well. So that is a risk with all bylaws, and we manage that risk as well as we can through the analysis that we provide and the interpretation and the advice we provide to decision makers.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more question? It's just about what you were alluding to about the CEO's powers. So the CEO, temporary ban, I should say, or change, just thinking on those lines, because it was done for the North Beach car park. So if those three criteria that was mentioned before you mentioned are ticked off and there is evidence, and we're not going to be reviewing it for a few years, then that's a track that they can afford to go down. That's what we chose to do.
It would have to meet two components of criteria. One is what's in the Act, so that's those three powers, but it also has to be reasonable and proportionate. And they're legal test words, so you have to make an argument that they're reasonable and proportionate. And the Bill of Rights Act assessment as well might be around freedom of association, freedom of movement, and other things. But it's also looking at what the impacts are and whether prohibiting freedom camping will address them. So a standard thing that we go through, which is a little out of order here, with the Section 155 tests, they're in the Local Government Act, but they're kind of similar to what we would do with most bylaw-related matters, which is looking at whether it's the most appropriate way to address the problem. So we have to weigh up whether a use of a regulatory power, which is a serious thing to do, is justifiable. And we also look at whether it has any New Zealand Bill of Rights Act implications, which is all part of it. So looking at the temporary power, you'd have to look at the Act and why you were looking at using the temporary power. What was it that was urgent or a significant enough problem to regulate? And then within the bylaw itself, there are those four bases on which the Chief Executive can use those powers, and they're focused. They are maintenance, events, the other two. And even then it's for the Chief Executive to decide whether she wants to use that power, and then on what basis she would be doing it, whether it would be at weekends or during a set time of year or within certain parameters, and whether that was justifiable as well. Yeah, so it's...
Yeah, it's a really tricky, it's really the problem.
Yes, but the trouble, how can I say this? The Freedom Camping Act doesn't do what many people would like it to do. And it doesn't empower councils to do what many people would like councils to do.
It would be really important for us to find a solution for the community, because it's just escalating, and the Freedom Campers, it's a never ending stream, and just so popular here on the coast, and such a lovely place to come. They keep coming and the issues are just getting out of control. So it'd be really great to be able to find some solutions for this. I appreciate that. Yeah, this was not in new. 2021 was not in new.
Yes, it was not a new. I'm conscious that Philip also has a presentation to get through. Now it's a question, I've got the rest of us to get through.
I'm just curious here, I'm not even saying the question and look at it, so just indulge me for a minute. Say someone wanted to, I think North Beach car park, right, Kim, which is what the Residents Association was originally pushing for, was a ban on freedom camping car park, but we were told it's a breach of the bylaw. Is that correct?
Because it's
the Act.
You were looking at overnight parking restrictions, which are in conflict with.
But if you wanted to make it just a no freedom camping zone, and that would be a no because it's not bylaw review time, or no because it's a breach of the Freedom Camping Act.
It's not a breach to put a ban in place, but you can only put a ban in place if you comply with the assessment criteria in the Act.
And have we done the work to know if North Beach would meet that assessment criteria if it was during?
When we looked at it during the review in 2021, we assessed that there were access issues at weekends over the surf lifesaving season. That was when the car park was very busy. That was when it was clear that having people staying overnight was a problem for access.
Yeah.
So again, focused on
That's where-
those
that's how far.
words and and so that's how we've ended up with a now permanent ban at weekends over the long summer period.
Okay, thank you.
Right, now let's move on from favourite Bible, Linwood's favourite Bible.
So the legislation sets the scope, and some of the legislation is fairly broad and some is very narrow and has those strong assessment criteria. So it is quite different, and people often get confused about why we can do something with one bylaw and not the other. And the answer is often because of that primary act that gives the bylaw making powers and the parameters that it sets. The Local Government Act contains processes for bylaws that are often common to many bylaws, but not all. So there's an interaction between other legislation and the Local Government Act, but in a way that's inconsistent. So again, the process we use can be different, and it's a bit tricky. The general principles of bylaws we talked about before. The LGA bylaw making tests apply to all bylaws made under the Local Government Act, which is quite a few of our bylaws, and many other bylaws will be made under different legislation, but be deemed to be made under the Local Government Act. So they have to follow those processes. So we have to demonstrate, we have to look at, assess what the problems are, look at whether a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing those problems, most appropriate form, which is just about clarity of drafting, and then that Bill of Rights Act assessment. And that can come up for things around freedom of movement. So that came up with the cruising and prohibited times on roads bylaw that stops people accessing certain roads at night. And it's come up in relation to, I don't know, Whanganui gang patch law, because it's freedom of expression. So we have to do that assessment around some of those rights to check whether it's an appropriate use of our regulatory power. And that all has to be documented, and it's all part of what goes to decision makers and is consulted on. So that legislative review cycle, it is complicated to work through all of those reviews in a 10-year time period, and you'll see coming up we have an extraordinary amount of bylaw reviews this term of council. The review process is very detailed. It's not just like you look at it and go, is it fine? Yes, it is. Let's make some changes and consult. You need to go through the same process as making a bylaw. So look at all the clauses. Can we justify them? Are they up to date? Are they fit for purpose? Do they link to a bylaw making power? Are they working or not? The review process can take 12 to 18 months, and 6 months of that is really just the consultation process at the end. There's a lot of work that happens before then. We go through a big internal process. So we look at that clause by clause, identify all the issues. We will recommend changes and prepare reports. This term of council, those reports will go to the Policy and Planning Committee, and that committee, which is a committee of the whole council, will decide whether they're happy with the review and whether we can proceed with consultation. Then we undertake public consultation. Sometimes that's a special consultative procedure. Again, it depends on the legislation that we're using, and that normally involves a hearing process. We really encourage community boards to be involved in that process and to make submissions. Bylaws can only be adopted by council. That power cannot be delegated. That's set in Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act. There are sometimes things that can be delegated within bylaws. So, for example, traffic and parking decisions on time limited parking and yellow lines and other things, as you know, can be delegated to community boards. But the bylaw itself, the bylaw making amendments to the bylaw, can only rest with council. This term of council, we have 11 bylaws to review. That is an extraordinary amount. Philip's going to talk to you about the alcohol restrictions bylaw. The 3 water bylaws there, trade waste, which is liquid industrial waste that goes into the wastewater system, stormwater and land drainage, water supply and wastewater, they all need to be reviewed in relation to the new national changes to the water services legislation. So they need to be assessed for alignment with that new legislation, and then they need to be amended later. And then that is complicated because it takes a new approach, which we haven't had with bylaws before, which also requires us to put in place management plans in relation to those different types of water services. So that's a really big piece of work that will be multiple years, but we've got to get the first stage done by a set date that's specified in legislation. So that's added to the workload. This term, traffic and parking bylaw and stock on roads bylaw, I am leading, and we'll come back and talk to you about that when we're ready. So you'll know that that bylaw is quite large. It's technical, it's administrative, and it's really important. It is essential for functioning stock on roads is largely rural, so less relevance for this committee. General bylaw is a legal administrative type of bylaw. It's small and technical, not likely to be of wide public interest, but important. Marine, river and lake facilities bylaw is about the built structures that we use to access waterways that are council infrastructure. So jetties, wharves, boat ramps, slipways, a lot around the peninsula, a lot along the coastal area, and also in the Groins and Lake Road Kahatu in the Northern Lakes. And then later in the term, in the second half, we'll be looking at the brothels, location and commercial sexual services signage bylaw, the public places bylaw, which deals with all sorts of events that may or could or shouldn't happen in public places and looks at reasonable controls to balance some of those competing uses. And then the cemeteries bylaw manages aspects of what people are able to do and not do within cemeteries. Any questions on any of those? Yes.
Just on the cemeteries one, is there going to be early engagement with elected members around different aspects? I'm mindful there's one particularly contentious aspect, but
there are probably several, and we're aware of some issues already, but we're not working on that one yet, but we will be seeking views.
Is there anything we're considering in the short term?
There may well be in the operational parts of council, but in terms of our work, in terms of reviewing bylaws, we just know that that one's coming up and we're not looking at it for the next year or so, but we will be looking at it within this term.
I guess the concern is that the longer the problem is left, the bigger it becomes.
Yes, but it's partly around the competing workload. So there's different aspects to it. There may well be things that can be managed on an operational level at the moment, and there are other aspects in terms of the regulatory settings that will take longer to pin down and have to be done through this formal process.
And just in regards to the handbook, we made some changes to the handbook, in a relatively short space of time with a relatively quick process.
Yes.
So
do you mean the high water cremation change?
Yeah, there was some stuff that was put in. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but there were changes made to the handbook. A very truncated process.
So that's an amendment. It was. It still had to go through all of those processes, but the Burial and Cremation Act, which is a very old piece of legislation, it doesn't have the assessment criteria that are as strict and tight as some of the other bylaws. So it may, and also I think the scope of those changes weren't fundamental. So it was able to be done last term when there was capacity, because it was a minor matter.
Can I just flag, there's a really sensitive issue with our cemeteries that needs addressing. It's been going on for, how long, Jackie? 5, 6 years, maybe 7. And the longer it's been left, the bigger the problem is becoming. And it's going to require a degree of sensitivity around how we engage, but it's something that we do need to.
Do you want to have a chat afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, Jackie was also one that raised it. So, yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
We're coming to the end of our time, so we should move on to the alcohol restrictions and public places bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this section of the presentation then is to provide the board with information on alcohol control bylaws generally, our current alcohol control bylaw specifically, to just touch on the public places in this community board area in which the bylaw applies, and what's involved in the review of the current bylaw and how the board can provide input. There's going to be, hopefully there will be quite a bit of ground to cover, but if we don't have time to complete everything, I'll highlight the 3 main points I'd like to make sure that the board takes away from this presentation, and that is that first point, alcohol control bylaws have got a specific and limited purpose, that is to control the consumption and possession of alcohol in public places. Second point is the process for making alcohol control bylaws is set out in legislation, and that requires that we meet certain criteria before we can put these restrictions in place. And the third point is that we want to hear from the board about the appropriateness of the current bylaw and restrictions in this community board area, whether we should be considering amending these removing them, putting in place any potential new alcohol ban areas. So those are the three main points to take away. I'll rattle through alcohol control bylaws. These are secondary legislation and have got specific and limited purpose. We can use them to prohibit or regulate the consumption and possession of alcohol in public places. What we can't use them for is to deal directly with other potentially related behaviours, such as those listed on the slide. As I mentioned, when we are making or reviewing alcohol control bylaws, the Act, which is the Local Government Act, requires that we meet criteria, including that there is evidence that the area to which the bylaw is intended to apply has experienced a high level of, I'm going to quote this from the Act, a high level of crime or disorder that can be shown to have been caused or made worse by alcohol consumption in the area, end quote. And when I talk about crime and disorder or evidence, that's what I mean. It's that high level of crime and disorder that can be shown to have been caused or made worse by alcohol consumption in the area, or if we're looking at existing ban areas, whether that high level would be likely to return if there wasn't a ban there, or if it would arise if the bylaw wasn't continued after review. As Tina mentioned at the beginning, it's worth noting that only the police can enforce alcohol control bylaws. So it's something that we're working with police on in the review because they have an important part in it. Our alcohol control bylaw, we've had an alcohol control bylaw, or before that, area-specific liquor control bans for many years now. The current one was adopted in 2018, and because we have to review our bylaws every 10 years, we've got until November 2028 to complete this review. We're starting now because there's a considerable amount of work to be done to assess the bylaw generally, but also all of the alcohol bylaw areas we have in the district. When I talk about public places as well, it's worth pointing out there's a specific definition of that. So a public place under the relevant legislation, the Local Government Act of 2002, a public place means a place that is open to or being used by the public. So that doesn't necessarily mean land owned or managed by the council. It can be any place that's open to or being used by the public, such as a non-council owned car park, but it does exclude licensed premises and private residences. This is a map of where we have alcohol control bylaws across our district. You'll see the dots are colour coded. This reflects the different settings that we use for different alcohol ban areas. So you'll see some that are red dots, and those are alcohol ban areas that apply at all times, 24/7. The ones that are black dots are the ban areas that are in place and with the restrictions that apply every night at night. The green dots you see are ban areas where restrictions apply on specific times, days or dates. And that also includes some sports fields that are designated for rugby league matches. I've put that in as a box to show you all by category rather than trying to put them in place, trying to put a dot for each one of them in the district, otherwise there'd be no map left. There's also yellow dots, and these are alcohol ban areas that apply for 24 hours when large-scale events are held in that location. And the bylaw provides for the chief executive, no, sorry, not chief executive, well, it's for staff, it's a delegated power in reality, to nominate an event that would have a large-scale event alcohol ban applied to it. Most recently in QE2 Park, there was one for the Worship Festival, and I think the last one of the season is going to be Electric Avenue at Hagley Park. I'll just run through the alcohol ban areas locally.
So Alex,
sorry.
on this part. Yeah, sorry, I just think we should make QE2 because my understanding is that there's signs there all the time saying it's alcohol ban area.
It is an alcohol ban area for when when there's been a nominated event. So I can't answer if there's anything, if there's a sign there at other times of the year, then that's something we'll have to pick up and take a note of.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, I might be confusing myself there, but my understanding, I just thought it was the alcohol ban area.
At Hadley Park, for instance, I know we're not talking the same venue, but there are alcohol restrictions in place there all the time, but they apply at night. But if a large scale event is held there, then the effect is to extend the time that those restrictions can be applied for 24 hours only. So it could well be, I'm not sure, it might be that the signs at Hadley Park are the ones that are there all the time, even if there are not events being held.
That's right. I'm just curious.
But we'll note that, thank you, because I could look into that, thank you. They should go up for the event and then come down afterwards, that's the system. So Woolston Village is a relatively recent alcohol ban area that was put in place in 2023 after a temporary alcohol ban was introduced in 2022.
It's been very successful.
I'm just going to rattle through these because of time, if that's okay, but you'll see where the extent is. That applies 24/7. Also, alcohol ban area in the New Brighton Royal Marine Parade and surrounding areas. Again, it's a 24/7 alcohol ban. Spencer Park is one of those ones that applies on a specific date, specific time. That's New Year's Eve. And QE2 Park, again, that is a 24-hour ban, but it applies only when a nominated event is held there. And incidentally, on the large-scale event alcohol bans, if we give 14 days notice, public notice, we're also able to give the police power to have immediate power of search within the alcohol ban area when there is a large-scale event ban put in place. So there's also one at Graffiti Domain and at Thompson Park as well, a 24-hour large-scale event alcohol ban. The rugby league playing fields in your area, incidentally, I should add, at Bromley Park, it's rugby league playing field 1, Cuthbert Green, it's playing fields 1 and 2, Wainoni Park, playing fields 1 and 2, and Woolston Park is playing field 1. Got to put that on the slide, I apologise. Now you'll see those apply at certain times, not all the time.
And that was done at the request of rugby league.
That's right. So for the bylaw review, then we're looking at the police data of crime and disorder linked to drinking in the area. We're at the moment looking at what we received from the police when we did the local alcohol policy. We got a load of information from them up to 2023 is the period for which we have data. We're looking at that, and then we will look to fill the gaps from that with more up-to-date information. But that's the first starting point. We have to look at the evidence that is or would be likely to be a high level of crime or disorder caused by drinking in the area. One of the reasons why we're coming to community boards is not just to let you know about this, but also because we want to understand views on whether if we were to amend or take away any of the existing alcohol ban areas in your community board area, would that be likely in your view that a high level of crime or disorder would return there without the bylaw in place, or arise if the existing bylaw was not the existing ban was not continued or replaced with similar restrictions? We also wish to know whether there are any areas we should be looking at as potential new alcohol ban areas. And we need to look at the appropriateness of the overall bylaw generally, whether it's appropriate and proportionate.
So out of the gate, this has come up a few times, but the area around Eastgate, including Linwood Park, and it has come up with, there is some significant alcohol-related disorder around the Eastgate Mall and on the other side or in that whole intersection. So it's worth having a look whether it might be appropriate use.
Thank you, that's helpful. Just so you can see our high-level timeline, we are looking to do our analysis and identify issues this year and prepare the relevant reports. Next year is when we're looking to go out to consultation. That will be an opportunity for community boards to make submissions. There'll also be hearings, and we're looking to get the bylaw in force at the end of 2027 or early 2028. In the meantime, although we're looking to hear from community boards formally through the submissions process to hearings, to consultation, sorry, we would welcome initial feedback from the board either today, or if you wish to give further thought to the issues we've covered, perhaps in writing subsequently. We're still at an early stage in the review, so we're not in a position to set out our proposals for feedback, but at the appropriate time, we will provide a memo outlining our developing thinking, and at that point, community boards may wish to request a follow-up session, or you may wish to just respond in writing to that memo. And like I say, in any event, community boards will be able to make submissions on the proposals when we got to.
In terms of the process for alcohol ban, so like I for the Wolston one, I got it before I was on the board. I got a petition, and then we had the board agreed, and it went to the council, all that stuff. So, but if we amend the bylaw, we don't have to go through that part of the process. It's just the council that decides. Is that correct?
Jump in. The review will look at all of those issues and propose adding, subtracting, altering, and then you can submit on that. But we also welcome feedback before then if you have areas of concern. But just to reiterate what Philip was saying, where this bylaw has a high threshold where it requires evidence before a council can regulate. It's other than Freedom Camping, which has limited criteria, it has the strictest criteria for the use of regulatory power.
So there's a special consultative procedure on the bylaw and all aspects of it.
Yeah.
So then the community who are affected by the issue in particular can come and make, and that would be evidence. You don't have to.
No, we will prepare that evidence for the review and make proposal based on working with the police and their data and evidence, and using whatever sources we can, including early feedback from boards.
So if we wanted to have an area included in the restricted areas, we would have to encourage the community to provide early feedback.
Yes, or just get in touch with Philip and let him know an area. So something like the Eastgate area is helpful, and then Philip will, because there's a lot of research work to look at whether or not the right kinds of data and evidence are there. And there's it's not purely data driven, it's about impressions and anecdotal. There's a whole mix of different things that we look at. But it's not as if it's an open opportunity to tell us everywhere and we will proceed with it. We have to assess that it meets the criteria in the Act before we would recommend it.
Well, we're at the posted time, but just off quickly, is there any areas where, and very quickly, as anybody thinks that there could be an alcohol ban area, or any of the existing alcohol ban areas that some people think needs amending? Kelly and then Yang?
Yeah, I mean, my observation is that they were sensible and good. If we were wanting to, if we do notice something over the next 6 months or so, should we contact you directly and have a bit of a...
Yes, please. Yeah. In fact,
just send it from me, please.
Yeah. We put our email address up there. If you need to get in contact with our team, then that's the address, or via the advisor. Thank you. Yeah. The purpose is to make sure that the ones we have in place are appropriate and proportionate, and that there is evidence to either continue it or, if necessary, amend it, or if the evidence indicates, and the community views indicate that there isn't a need to have a restriction in place, they can also be taken off removed from the bylaw as well if it served its purpose, and that's another thing to consider as well.
Just to add to that as well, this is a bylaw where you have to specify the area in maps in the bylaw. So alterations to areas and boundaries are also part of what is being looked at. So if it doesn't quite cover what it needs to cover, then let us know that as well.
Right, Danny?
Just wondering, and I mean, I know that's quite a high hurdle, but The one area that I do wonder is what's happening at Bexley Reserve.
Yeah,
There's a lot of activity there, there's a lot of antisocial activity happening from time to time, but whether that's related to alcohol or not, I guess we might be able to get some data, but it might be useful just to try and get some data.
Thank you. Like I say, we're working with the police on this, so we'll be talking to them to ask about the existing places, but also their experience of anywhere in the district that we should be considering adding. And we can say we've been notified that this place is a place of interest, and we can ask them to express their views as well. And also we'll be speaking to we are speaking to the teams within council that manage reserves and parks, and also roads, pathways, and so on, and public places where we are. Where we have staff on the ground who can see what life is like daily as well.
So one thing that I'm mindful of is when the stadium comes into town, it's going to be quite a big impact. And initially when the first sort of alcohol-free bylaws came in, there was concern around how it's policed and how it's enforced. And I looked at what I was on the youth council at the time, and I looked at what Nelson Council did, and they worked with the youth council around some messaging that was youth friendly and just help young people kind of understand it. So I guess for me, like, if we are going to review it, which sounds like we will, one of the things I'm really interested in is just to get a bit of a sense of how it's been enforced. This has also been a question that has been raised in the old Linwood Village, sorry, it's not in Linwood Ward, but it's Linwood Village. The Stanmore Road, Worcester Street, that there's been concerns that the bans are enforced unequally. But I mean, I'm not saying that's the case. It's just if there's any evidence or data that we have around how they are actually being enforced, I think that might be quite useful. Thank you.
I was just going to say that that is useful to raise, but it is not something that the bylaw would have control over, in the sense that it can only be enforced by the police, and the resourcing and priorities and all of the aspects of police work are outside of the bylaw's influence. All the bylaw can do is reflect the evidence and put the regulation in place, and then it's up to the police how they enforce it. But that issue is useful to raise, and we can certainly communicate. So, okay. Do you have any more?
All right. Thank you very much. And we all look forward to this at this time next term.
Just thinking about the stadium, that is part of the central city ban area already. So that's the 24/7 ban.
Right. So we can. Ini dia ki uru takunui, ki a wātia, ki a mama, ki nākau, te tingana, te wairoi, te aratata, koe a rā I rongo, whakaia, mai ki rongo, ki te tina, ue, taiki.